Claire Kilroy is the author of 4 previous novels, including Tenderwire and The Devil I Know. She was awarded the Rooney Prize in 2004 and has been shortlisted for many other prizes, including the Irish Novel of the Year and the Carey Group Prize for Fiction. Soldier Sailor, the reason we're all here this evening, is Kilroy's first novel in over a decade, and what Anne Enright has called a scorching read. The novel is a descent into the early days of motherhood told through a woman soldier's monologue to her baby son, Sailor. Poem Tribune has said of it, quote, "I'm not aware of another book like this, so touching, with a sense of tenderness and elements of the mythological, a book that many women will enjoy, and I think most men would not only benefit from, but need badly." Soldier Sailor was shortlisted for the Easton Novel of the Year in 2023. And Scribner has just published it for readers here in the United States, and we're very grateful to have some of the publishers here this evening, so thank you and welcome. Tonight, Claire will be in conversation with NYU's own Conor Creaney, who is Clinical Associate Professor in NYU's Expository Writing Program Department. Conor, without further ado, I'll turn it over to you.
Brilliant. Thanks, Caroline. So you're very welcome, Claire. We're excited to have you here. So
I was excited. Do we need these?
well, I think we kind of do as for the recording as well.
For the look of it.
Just,
I feel like singing to you.
so would you like to do give us a little introductory reading, perhaps?
Sure, yeah. Can I
With a preface?
say thank you for being here first? Could I thank NYU and in particular Caroline Heafy and Mary Elizabeth Lennon for looking after me. And it's really great to be not at home, minding my child. And also Conor, Conor has also, we know each other about 10 years now.
12, I was thinking.
I teach NYU in Dublin program that Conor organizes. So Conor and I meet up every year, and each year we're a bit more decrepit.
Indeed.
And we discuss what's gone wrong this year. We got a menu. We went for lunch. We both had to go wear our glasses.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
That was a new development.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
We know how.
Yeah.
So it's sort of kind of this Beckettian relationship that I have, but it's always a pleasure to see you.
You too.
Like, will I stand up? No. Soldier Sailor is a book about minding a preschooler. Sailor is the name of the little boy. The narrator, Soldier, is her nickname from an old friend that she runs into. So the book is addressed to Sailor. So you in this book is Sailor. It's when you're a mother, you end up, they tell you to talk to your child, but you end up doing it anyway. You go around chatting away, look at this, look at the dog, you know, and sometimes you find yourself going, isn't that a lovely apple? You realize you don't have your child, but you're in this constant chat mode when they're really small. So that is the thing about the chat is you don't tell them anything real. You know, there's the kind of, and you hear all these women going, la, 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 but there's actually a very different voice inside. So I suppose Soldier Sailor is the actual woman's voice, contemplating things. This part I'm going to read is, Soldier has run into her old friend who is also a father, and they're just sitting on a bench. His kids are in the playground. Sailor is sitting on his knee. And I have to multitask now. Do you want to see this? Will I? I'm a professional writer. Oh my God, I feel like Freddie Mercury. I've gone through my whole life not having to do that. Do something new. Okay, so man and woman on a bench with a toddler in between them. My friend was wearing a blue gingham shirt, sleeves rolled up. I could smell the fabric conditioner. Can you hear me? Yeah. Around and around his neck, your little car went. Sailor is driving a car around the friend's neck. It was mesmeric watching you touch him, your hands uncharacteristically gentle. Gentle, I used to instruct you when you petted dogs too enthusiastically. Gentle, gentle. It was several years later before I realized that you thought gentle meant stroke. Can I gentle the dog, Mama? Yes, but always ask the owner first. You wrapped your arms around my friend's neck and then kissed his face in that way toddlers do. Not a peck so much as a suction cup. Sorry, I said, and went to pull you off. It's okay. Don't apologize for your child. He's an explorer. I miss them. What? Babies, infants. Really? I do. I'd have more if I could. Huh. I would have loved a little sailor for you, a little sister for you. Bet you didn't know that, sailor. She had a name, and oh, I almost cried thinking of her last night. But I didn't cry. I fell asleep. And nobody woke me bawling during the night, so I was better able to love the child I did have when I woke up feeling human this morning. You pulled at the neck of my friend's shirt to peer down. I caught a glimpse of his chest. One of the many irritating things about fathers is that their bodies stay the same. Childbirth wreaks no havoc upon them. You dropped the card down his shirt. He yelped at its coldness, then you plunged your hand down after it. I tried to detach you, but you shrieked, and my friend said, "Leave him, he's fine." He intercepted the car at the waistband of his jeans, pulled out his shirt to free it, returned it to you. I sat back in the sun. How are you? My friend asked then, and not in a casual way, not as a variation on hello, but as a considered inquiry into my well-being, inviting a considered response. His manner of emphasizing certain words, how are you? Such a lovely way he had, that ability of his to compress fondness into his voice. Some people have these qualities. Be one of them, sailor. Have I told you this before? It bears repeating. How are you? I could feel his eyes on me. I am tired. I am lonely. I have found myself mired in resentment in this new life. Become a person I don't wish to be, feeling constant guilt for not feeling constant gratitude for the blessing that is my child. I do feel constant gratitude. I adore my child, but I am tired. I am lonely. I am lost. Ah, you know, I shrugged. How about you? He shrugged back. Same. I wondered whether he could detect fondness in my voice, and indeed whether you could, because surely it was better for you to be around warmth and goodwill than your parents' relentless bickering. These were the things I wondered about on that bench. When you were born, you didn't enter my world. I entered yours. I crawled through the small door that had appeared in the wall, and there you were, oh my God, perfect. It took me some time to realize your father was no longer with us. Not quite. He was there in the beginning, but at some point wandered off, stepping out to make a phone call from which he never fully hung up, popping his head in from time to time to see how we were doing. Would we like a cup of tea? It was just you and me on our own in there for a while. And then it was you and me and other infants and their carers. Then one day I noticed a man surrounded by things that were too small for him, things he tripped over or snapped in two with his clumsy male strength, a man soothing tears, a man kissing boo-boos better, a man being, I almost said, a woman. Do you remember the old days? I asked him. An instant smile. I remember the old days. They were exciting. Do you remember the exciting people? I do. I remember the exciting people, the people doing exciting things, wearing ironical clothes. Yeah, those clothes they wore were ironical. Where did they all go? The exciting people doing the exciting things, wearing ironical clothes. It's like I dreamt them. Wait, weren't we doing the exciting things? We were. Those things we did were exciting. And that shirt you had was ironical. Remember your ironical cardigan? I do. I remember my ironical cardigan. So, weren't we the exciting people? Yes, we were the exciting people. But then, alas, look at the cut of us now. You sent the car careening down his shirt again, and he caught it on the other end. Look, he told you, reaching into my hair. It's in Mama's ear. His fingers made that seashell sound as they brushed my ear, and I shuddered to be touched with such delicacy. Sorry, are you cold? Take my jacket. He leaned across to drape it over my shoulders, enclosing me within the windbreak of his chest, your small body cupped in the hollow between us. You gurgled with glee. You literally gurgled. I looked up. His honey-haired daughter was standing there. Hi, sweetie, I said brightly, straightening up. My mummy says, my mummy says, come here, pet, he said, tapping his free knee, but she didn't budge, remained planted there, twisting a button on her cardigan. I took you for my friend's knee and perched you on mine. She glanced sidelong up at me, taking in her friend's jacket on my shoulders. My mummy says, my mummy, says, my heart raced as I waited to hear what her mummy had to say.
Fantastic. So Claire, the that excerpt has the friend in it. So the friend seems like a super interesting character because he's the person who gets Soldier out of the sort of bubble that she's in. And it seems like an important sort of structuring kind of element for the novel, because the book is so much about the experience of being in this tiny little claustrophobic bubble. So I'm wondering, how he worked for you.
It is really claustrophobic, the novel, up until this guy appears, and it's also not too female, but it was very female, and I wanted to write the other way of looking at the same thing and the way men parent differently. And one of the things I personally noticed about having a child is that it almost, when you become a family, it almost separates the family, because the women get sent off down one chute and end up doing this all-consuming work, and the men don't. And you don't see your partner or husband anymore, or you do in passing. So you are with your child and with an infant and an infant company. And it's very sorrowful. So I wanted to escape that in my own head, and this friend character became that escape of he's a lament for lost youth. You know, you really age so suddenly when you have a child. You age like 20 years overnight. It's your worldview is changed. So he is a lament. But I liked writing him enormously. I liked him.
I see. No, I mean, well, I think we all
What's
liked
your
him. I
point,
think everyone who read the book wanted to. Well, it just seemed like an interesting, like, because again, the book has this incredible intensity to it.
Yeah.
That when when the friend shows up here, everyone kind of takes a nice breath and is like,
yeah,
including
the mother.
Right. I mean,
especially the mother.
Yeah. And I mean, it seems really interesting in terms of how, as you say, when you have a child, you suddenly age 20 years. That the way the time, I mean, the novel is so much about time. Right?
Yes.
It's about like on many levels, like it's on on the level of repetition, the day-to-day being so repetitious, and you have one chapter where it sort of really kind of just gets into the sort of, like, it feels quite Beckettian, right, in the sense of, I'm not sure how to deliver that, but like, did you think in terms of Beckett at all?
He gets cited at the end, but I knew to do this, and it's a really hard thing to tell yourself you have to do if you're a novelist, because you want plot and character and action, and they're the things that I like. But but I had to write this chapter that is a day in the life with, I think, and it's chapter 2, like it's right up front of the book. It's it's a hard read. I think he's about 10 months old, and that I don't think he can speak or walk, but it's to write that chapter, and I knew it had to be just, this is what happens, this is how the day goes. So this is partly why I really needed the friend character to come in when he came in, and it's excruciatingly repetitious, a day with a child. And a large part of it is you look really stupid. Other people are looking at you, because I know this from when I didn't have a kid, and I go, look at your one, she's dropped her. You know, you know how stupid you look, and you're so aware, and yet you're doing 30 things at the same time. And when you are in that position, it's very difficult. So I wanted to portray just to get a child out the door involves being in the UN and negotiating and haggling, and then it all blows up in your face anyway, you know, and you're wrecked, you haven't slept. So, um, and I hadn't seen it before. I didn't know it until I had a kid. And then everyone goes, yeah. Like, if you know, you know. so, so yeah, it was hard. It almost felt like a bad idea as a novelist to write that chapter of just here's a day.
Why a bad idea as a novelist?
Because it's boring. It's
Okay,
so
yeah.
boring. Nothing happens and everything
Yeah.
happens.
Yeah. But I mean, but I feel like you pull it off, right? I mean, the writing is so good and so sort of
I really had to
energetic, you know?
work my craft on that particular chapter. You know, it's not, other chapters are about the literary imagination where she escapes in her head, but that chapter is just all the skills I have as a novelist had to work that one to pace it, to make it, given that it's an excruciatingly boring day. How do you write excruciating boredom without it being excruciatingly boring? And that was the challenge. And it had to be done. There's no point in not doing it if you're going to write about this.
And yeah, I mean, as you said, like or as Soldier says, my life was so stupid at one point, you know, and
But
just
that's
this
the refrain. It was all
yeah,
so
no, it
stupid.
comes up like, yeah, like the sense of the absurdity of parenting is really striking, you know, or the sense that you regress to this kind of place of like,
Yes.
I don't do anything remotely interesting. I don't use any of that big brain of mine that's done all this interesting stuff in the past. You know, yeah, and you're just like everything's just shrunk down.
But also you turn into a toddler yourself. And like toddlers start screaming when they don't have the words to tell you what they want or need. And when you're so stressed and have no time to gather yourself, you quickly lose the words. So you end up screaming and then you don't like yourself. And then there's all of, you know, that cycle. So soldier and sailor grow up together, you know, and mature together, even though there's like 30 odd year gap between them.
That, I mean, that kind of ties into this kind of the voice of the novel. I mean, it seems like it's such a distinctive kind of powerful voice that Soldier has, and the book, as you heard, is written in direct address to the kid. What did that enable you to do to sort of have it as this sort of almost kind of, you know, epistolary kind of direct communication with a child who couldn't understand you at the time? So like it seems it's always kind of oriented to the future, like the future version of the kid who's going to be able to read it.
Really interesting how when your child is asleep, you just love them so much and they're so perfect and you have these feelings of intensity well up, but they never see it, you know, because they just see stressed out you. When I went to write this novel, it's not, I didn't set out to write a novel about being a mother. I wanted to escape that and become the old writer, the one I used to be, I mean, the book before this was about the collapse of the Irish economy. The one before that was about being a writer in the 80s in Dublin. Before that, I was a concert violinist. Then there was a woman who stole a painting. You know, and that was the imagination doing its thing. And I wanted to write one of them. And the great realization was that that woman's gone, you know, and I sat there going, like, I'm no longer her. I'm stupid, you know. And I was stupid. Like it's very, your brain is reordered and I couldn't find the words I needed anymore, the toddler thing. And it was once I got him into a crash, I would then sit in front of the computer and like realize you're not who you were anymore and you don't have those. And I went back to that Yeats poem, The Circus Animal's Desertion, which is about writer's block. You know, all my circus animals have deserted me. And then he enumerates his glorious creatures. And at the end, he says, and now I must lie down where all the ladders start, in the foul rag and bone shop of my heart. And I lay down in the foul rag and bone shop of my heart. And all that was left of me was a voice talking to her child. So I don't think this could have come out any other way. You know, it just came out this woman's voice talking to her child and saying, I love you and I'm sorry about this. And then you think back to your own mother, and I can't remember anything, because you can't remember by definition of how we evolved. We don't really remember anything before the age 2.5, 3. So I don't know anything about my mother. I didn't know anything about that female maternal experience. And so it made sense it was such a hidden thing to just write it, you know? And that's how it evolved, not because I sat down with a plan. Not big on plans, Connor.
Overrated. Also ties into well, the isolation that that soldier experiences, right? It's very much about gender politics. It's very much about the structure of the society in which she's kind of left to do her own thing, and the husband is this sort of pretty unsympathetic figure, largely in the book, right, where there's sort of the sense that he's sort of he's doing his work and he's very patronizing, and he sort of patiently, quote unquote, patiently speaks to her in a way that's really maddening. And yeah, I'm just wondering how it seemed like kind of fun to write some of those scenes, or maybe that's not the word. Maybe cathartic, perhaps.
Could I describe any of this as fun? I remember thinking the IKEA scene was fun. Losing your child again in IKEA was fun. But there is a hurler in the ditch syndrome. Is that a phrase? The hurler in the ditch is the man, invariably a man who stands on the sidelines shouting at the people kicking the ball or whatever, hurling the hurl, telling them they're idiots and they're doing it all wrong. And the hurler in the ditch would do it worse, but he doesn't see that, he just thinks he knows everything. So unfortunately, soldier is married to a hurler on the ditch who just tells her the very obvious stuff that of course she can see, and I suppose in some ways maybe I was like that husband, when I would see women pushing prams and struggling, I go, how hard can it be? Like, just walk out the door. What's your problem? I had a patronizing attitude to it through ignorance. And then when you do it, you realize this is because there's no rules, there's no structure, there's no workplace, there's no knockoff time, there's no pay, there's no support, it's just this state of just get through it however you can. So in some ways, the husband is a lot of who I used to be pre-motherhood. And now I find myself helping people, if I see, like, I've just come through the airport and you can see, and they're almost those blokes who just they just get in the way of the woman because they want to get on the plane first, Whereas now I know how hard it is to get a kid on a plane. So you make it, there you go, it's you're a hero. And just basic stuff, but you don't know it's basic until you've been that older.
And the fights with the husband in the car scene is amazing, right? Where both of you are your most concentrated selves, or something, where it says, and
that's one of the ones that isn't really fiction.
Well, we wouldn't want to speculate, but But it is amazing. I mean, just that sense of the husband driving really, like, so he's sort of tailgating someone, driving really quickly, and you're like, this is the life of your wife and child you're taking into your hands to prove a point against some random driver on the road who you think's obnoxious. And just that sense of the kind of the fraughtness of the relationship and the way that like the back and forth, there's a back, like, well, if we would have left the house earlier if you had helped, and then he responds with, well, I wasn't allowed to help, and you respond with like, well, because you're incompetent, because you basically have some kind of weaponized incompetence, right? And that this sense of, I mean, I really felt, quite sort of chastened as a man by some of these scenes were like, wow, I need to be better. Because it's like
Result.
there you go. But no, it really is. I mean, just that, with just that sense
But
that,
see, men who say that are not part of the problem.
well, still probably part of the problem, but
Oh, you don't know how big the problem is.
probably not. But yeah, but I'm wondering, like, the kind of the energy of that relationship and the back and forth, but you still kind of, or the two characters, they love each other nonetheless. It's sort of, there's a bit of a, it goes to a different place eventually.
No, it does. But like parenting is such strain on a relationship. And I don't think I don't think we acknowledge that enough, the strain that it puts on, because, it's nice being in a couple and you can do stuff together, and then suddenly you can't do anything together. It seems like ever again, so I couldn't see a way of writing about being a parent without writing about the strain on a marriage, as well as the joy, this sounds like this novel has no love or joy. It's only about love. It's only about, because love is the only thing that gets you through this. And time, love and time is what it's. But yeah, it's women talk is the other thing, and I now have a crew of mother friends. That was really interesting. It was really interesting to it's connected to how patronized mothers are. Like today I went into Jones's Road, that beauty shop. We don't have it in Ireland, so I wandered in, and it's a makeup place. Bobby Brown makeup.
I see.
And the woman was like showing me this stuff, and she said, "Why are you here?" I said, "Oh, I'm doing a reading in NYU," and she said, "Oh, my friend has a movie in there's a Soho festival going," and then she said she's my tribe. This woman was she told me she was 53. She doesn't have kids, and she's in her 50s, and she's creative, and she's doing stuff. And I was like, yep, sounds like my tribe, and I'm a mother. And she said, no, the mothers, no, they don't know who they are anymore. And they come in and, they come in and get their makeup done, but they have no identity anymore because they're looking after other people all the time. And, I see that. Yes, you lose your identity when you have to look after other people's needs all the time because you're not thinking about who you are, what your needs are. But I told her that actually I found my tribe in a most unexpected place, which is the kind of parents group once my kid went to school. And I now have this circle of friends that I got at an unexpectedly older age. You make your friends when you're 20 and you think, and you keep them, that's your friends. But like by the time our kids were starting school, we were all in our late 30s, early 40s. And they're all so interesting and different and funny and good crack, and we're all really close now. So, and not boring moms with no identity. So I felt like, oh, don't, because I had patronized the moms when I was not a mother, look how incompetent. No, sorry, I wasn't that bad. Not, but it was in my head. I've got better things to be doing in my life. I'm off to write novels. It's so patronizing. Writing novels I thought was hard. Then I had a baby. It's a walk in the park.
Yeah, and I mean, tied into that is the question of shame as well. I mean, there's a lot of, it's like the baby, deliberately wallops his head on the ground at one point and has a big lump, and and soldiers, kind of for weeks is just going around with this like sense of shame, or like an exacerbated like bit of shame, even though shame permeates the whole novel in some ways. Yeah, I mean, how does that work?
Because you can never be good enough, and it's the most important job in the world, and you do lose your temper, and you're not going to get it right. And there's all the imagery of what it should look like, and you don't look like that, But of these friends I've made, we all feel terrible about whatever small thing it is. And our kids are fine, they're humans, they understand that you cannot be perfect when there's no break. If it was a 40-hour week being a mother, then you knock off, you go home, you get a nice sleep, you come back, but it isn't. So you slip up. And so because there's all this kind of hypervigilance kicks in, and self-sacrifice, like an insane level of self-sacrifice where you're not looking after your own needs at all. Like you only see this after it's over. So you're not functioning as well as you could. I read a book called, I only read it last year, Matrescence, which I'd never heard this word. It's what happens to you when you become a mother. And it's as big as adolescence. The change is as big. And it's funny, I was reading this woman, she's a science writer, and I was reading things and go, that happened to me. Like she saw something on the ground and thought it was a dead baby. And I saw something on the ground and thought it was a dead baby. Like your brain is sending strange signals to make you really careful. And you cannot slip up. And so you're like this, Not everyone has a different experience, but when I read this other woman in a different country, from a different background, she's science, I'm arts, writing stuff. And she even wrote about how hard it was to get a kid on a train. I was like, thank you. It's that hard. And how stressful it is. This kind of like, it's like going around with a bomb, and it is life and death because things go wrong, things can actually go wrong and game over. So you're at this level of, and connected to that, part of that hypervigilance is guilt and shame and all of those things, because you can literally never do a good enough job in your own eyes. You literally cannot do enough for your child. So you're going to fail. And then when you get away from it, it's all like, what was that about? And I think most of us accelerate away then, but I ended up going back and describing it. Let's have a look at that car crash, and let's see where the guts are. I was rubbernecking.
Was that painful?
Yeah.
Hard book to write?
Yeah. And what was really weird was I was sent there's an audio book narrated by an actor, Simone Collins, and they sent me the final thing. I couldn't listen. I was so angry. Like I was walking the dog going, fuck, it was really, it's that close to be back in that frustration and difficulty and stress, the stress of it, And I should go back and listen to the ending because that's not stressful.
Yeah, the ending's really nice.
But I didn't get that far.
Well, alongside that sense of the kind of the high stakesness is the sense of mortality as well. Like it really like it's a weirdly morbid book for a book about like a little kid in some ways, or not in a bad way, but just in a way that's like it's very interested in death and again just time. Like time seems to operate in all these different ways, right? Like the bubble, the kind of repetitive sort of circular day to day, but also jumping like backwards and forwards. And the sense of like your awareness of mortality really seems to kind of come into focus with the child.
No, I remember when I was in college, a few poetry and literature professors would say all poetry and literature is about sex and death. I never really knew what that meant. I was like, okay. sex and death. You know? And when you give birth, it all becomes about birth and death. Hypervigilance. See, that is what life with a baby is like. Um, so it's also connected to, I would see, like there was this guy who you see in town, and he was clearly mentally ill, and he was sort of bald but had dyed what hair. He did have black and it was long, and he wore these bizarre clothes, and he was filthy. Like, this man was not washing himself. And I remember seeing street kids kicking him and thinking, that could be my boy, you know? And everything becomes your child. You know, when I'm dead, I won't be able to protect him if he ends up like that. And I suppose the death is, you realize you're not going to be able to continue to protect. And I didn't think about death until birth. It's very animalistic and profound, you know, because you say hello to your baby and you know you're going to say goodbye, and who'll go first, and all these things suddenly are there. But it's I know, but and then this book is dedicated. It was dedicated solely to my father, who was a great father who cherished me. And I think the dads who cherish, particularly girls, their daughters, do well. They don't have to go impressing anyone. You know, they have the father's love is in place. It was dedicated just to him, but then the last change I made was, God help us, my friend's 5-year-old died. You know, so Rory Keegan and Sarah Bannon, she's American but Irish, lives in Ireland, and a novelist herself. So, you know, the novel is dedicated to Sarah because death is in the room once birth happens, and she must live with the loss of her boy, as must her husband Duncan and daughter Neve. So it's all that stuff that you don't think about, you suddenly think about when well, in my case, when I became a mother. There's funny bits in the book too.
I was going to say, you know, my next little point here on the sheet is there's lots of jokes. It's actually a really funny book. Doesn't sound like what you're saying, but it really, I mean, there's lots of slapstick. There's lots of, like, you know, people falling over and getting hit on the head and things, and a sort of mordant kind of, you know, kind of gallows humor thing that Soldier has. Yeah, I mean, yeah. Were you, like, the tone seems really interesting. Like, just like, how did you kind of manage the tone? Did you sort of find this is going into funny, silly territory, or this is going too dark, or, you know, or did it just sort of naturally unfold?
I don't remember. The only chapter I really sweated over was the one I've already told you about, Day in the Life with a. Can he walk yet? I don't think. No, he can only crawl. Day in Life with a. It's about 10 months old. That's the only one that I really sweated over. The rest came together quite naturally. You don't lose your sense of humor when you give birth, though everyone thinks you do. You know, everyone just dismisses you. It was Sarah Bannon again, the woman I mentioned, said that, you know, when you're pregnant, everyone's like, oh, look at the lovely pregnant lady. And then as soon as you give birth, it's like the light is switched off. You know, no one cares about you anymore. They look at your baby, which is great, but no one cares for the woman anymore. No one knows how she's doing or not doing. And she doesn't care for herself anymore, because it's like, keep your baby alive, you know, is he okay? So it's really strange, and yet women do it, you know. That's the kind of amazing thing, that women get on with it and get through it, and overwork, you know, they mothers are overworking, if you ask me. And actually it's not just mothers, it's if the elderly who's minding them, and it's women are carrying that burden. People with disabilities, women are carrying that burden, you know. Just, it's kind of lowly paid or unpaid and unvalued. It's a female endeavor, you know. So, like, if I do find myself looking watching who's doing what, and it's women are doing the kind of unpaid stuff, wearing the less cool clothes because they have to wear shoes that they can break into a run in, and have big pockets for all the crap they have to carry around. It is hard, and you can see it on the statistics of pay, the gender pay gap, all that stuff. There's a reason for that. It's because women are doing better until they give birth and they fall behind.
And it really feels like so many of the kind of arguments with the husband are, there's this sort of acknowledgement. It's like, well, you're just like, you're benefiting from patriarchy. Like you won at one point. I think she said like you won. And there's a lot of like sort of, you're just a sort of clueless bloke who's just cruising on the kind of the wave of patriarchal privilege or whatever. That seems kind of, that he doesn't seem very aware of, right? And but
I'm not sure I was even that aware of it until I saw the breakdown of who's doing what, until I became the one having to do all the work. Like part of me still feels, if you mention the patriarchy, it's like this crazy conspiracy theory, it's the 4G pumping stuff in the air, but actually the nuts and bolts of it are that women are doing all this unpaid labor and making sure the men have what they need to be in the workplace. So I'm not looking at you, Conor. But I'm looking at certain men, and those men won't read the book. So, you still have to write. I think the book is addressed to a boy for a reason, and it does say, don't be that guy. To say, soldier says to her child, don't be him. Now so don't do it.
that's that note. Do we want to pass it on to the audience for any questions people might have?
I almost feel I have to defend the men.
Go for it.
Because, so my son was born over 50 years ago, and I remember being in a friend's house and there was a soap opera on, and the character said, the woman was pregnant, and the character said, well, that's it, your life will never be your own. And I stood there and I smirked. It's like, that's not going to happen. So I was fortunate that I didn't have a husband that is like the gentleman in this book. However, my observation with my sons and their friends is men are very different now. Men are very involved in family. Men are very often doing the jobs that in the 60s, all the women did. I can remember saying to my husband at one point when I was working and he was working, and then the child was sick, and I was the one that always stayed home. I was like, wait a second, you have to stay home. I cannot stay home all the time. But I find now, at least American men, my observation is that they really take part in family life.
I was raised by a very hands-on father, but my experience as a mother was different. And as I say, women talk. So it just depends. We have an opt-in system. And well, speaking for Ireland, it's like the men can opt in if they would like to opt in, but if they don't, they don't. And the rest of the load is picked up, not by them. I think it really affects it that, say, my mother's generation, you say you worked, my mother's generation did not work outside the home. So I think I'm probably the first generation of Irish women expected to work-ish. Maybe a bit older than me, were expected to have careers and jobs and educations and stuff like that. So the men of my generation, when they look at their families, the women stayed at home and did everything, and the men worked. And the men were applauded for their endeavor and bringing home the bacon. So it is cultural, and I've noticed that when I do readings in Britain, a lot more men show up at the readings than in Ireland. So it is definitely cultural. We should do a head count here. There are men. You know, and the Irish readings really don't have as many. No offense, Conor. So yeah, it is still culturally acceptable in Ireland for men to do nothing really, you know, but less so in Britain. And I have noticed differences in how the novel is received by the British people. It's published in Britain, so most of the reviews are there. But this stuff is interesting. I read a thing, I think it's in 2,165 men and women would be paid the same. Just gotta hang in there.
I haven't read the ending of the novel yet. I haven't read yet to the end, but I have a question about the ending. So without asking you to give anything away, and I know Connor kind of alluded to maybe a slightly more fun ending, but this relates to narrative voice and that address to the child, which I've found so far in the novel gives it a real tension between sort of the sense of like mortality and threat. Everything feels a little bit like a threat in the novel, which keeps you on high alert as a reader. But at the same time, because you're addressing the narrative voice is addressing the child in a kind of future state, it feels like, well, we know we get past something. So was that, I'm wondering how much that was intentional, or how much that plays into a plot or a trajectory of the novel, and how much of that you knew in advance when you sat down to write it, or if that was just the way it had to come out.
It would be the way I write is I open a file called notes and I just add to it and add to it. So there's no structure. And I was writing the ending as I was writing the other parts. So the ending is a sequence in short sentences that was just sort of coming to me, kind of finishing thoughts to your child sort of sequence, which is part of the monologue you have going, not the, oh, look at the doggy stuff that we hear out loud, but this is what's going on in your head when you are with your child. So no, it wasn't thought out as such. It kind of, and I hate being vague because writing is a job, it's a process, there's techniques, but it sort of, it came together that way. This is the least structured of my novels. Nothing happens. There is no plot. I've given away the ending. But it is about talking to someone. That's all it's about, really, I suppose. Telling someone, talking to them. And it evolved organically. And that ending, I didn't come to chapter final and go, right now to think of something. It was there. And I cut and pasted it and put it there. And it was always meant to be there. And for whatever reason, all the endings of my novels have come easily. And I hope they always will. But you can't guess that. It's like a sneeze or something. Just
I have a question, not to be gauche and take the mic, but with the endings, I loved the beginning of the novel. I felt like talking about like pacing and tone, like it just really set you off on like a course with this woman and her relationship. And so her relationship to her son, and like, obviously she's crafting the story to her son, and this is how she begins this narrative. And so as you were putting together your notes, as you were putting together the novel, like how did you land on this almost sort of like both like very mythic, but almost like heist like thing where she takes him and, you know, is already like apologizing, I feel like so much in the beginning, which I just thought was really like it sucks the reader right in, but then it'll suck the son right in and places you in this place and time. But anyway, yeah, just how did you land on beginning that way?
You mean the content of that chapter or just that address?
More so like the content. Yeah, like the setting space time rather than starting with, like you said, the second chapter where it's like, here's a day in the life. Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
I remember speaking to a friend, John Boyne, and saying to him that it had been in the news that a baby, I think it was a baby girl, was found in a lane in Rathcoole, wrapped up, alive, healthy, just and a newborn. And I was saying to him, I know how that happens. I totally understand that now in a way that I would not have in the past. I'd gone, what a terrible mother, what an irresponsible woman. Now I go, yeah, I can see how a sequence of events and things just going wrong are going to lead to that outcome. And it's tragic and it's awful, but it's totally understandable to me now. So and he said, write that. And therefore that became the starting point. John Boyne is really good on structure and plot and encouraging Claire Kilroy. So he's really good person to sound out what you're trying to do. So the tone is an apology and an explanation, which is kind of thing you do when your kid's asleep. You don't necessarily go into big long explanations to a child who's not going to understand it anyway. And yeah, that the voice of it, it was just natural, even though I don't speak to my kid. You see, that's the thing, I will never speak to my kid like that one-on-one, but in my head I am. So these things evolve, and that evolved to that woman saying these things to her sleeping child. The child's always asleep when she talks, and he's a sleeping preschooler. He's about 4.5, gone back. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, why do you think that she would want to start the story by telling him this point specifically? I guess it's just what I was wondering, rather than, is it the point of, like, does she feel like maybe this is the worst thing I've done? And, and like starting almost like with like the big bang of it all.
Yeah,
and kind of
I
going
think
out.
it is the worst. What she feels she must atone for, is where she begins, because, well, there is no because. I don't have it's just the place where your mind goes to are the things that went wrong. Why did they go wrong? Why did you let that happen? It's that spiral that you can get into, particularly if you're not sleeping and you're not supported or any of this stuff. So yeah, she's banging like this happened. It is fiction. But I also understand with a few minor adjustments how it can happen, I did actually myself become suicidal when my child was 9.5 weeks old. And I have no history of this. So the thought process was very clear. And the thought process was, to be a good mother, I cannot raise this child because I feel suicidal and I will contaminate him. Therefore, I must kill myself for him to be like, that was the logic, and it was that clear, because I was no longer sleeping properly, or, and you have to do your best, and the best outcome here is if you leave, so it now it turns into a different story on the page, but my thought process was very clear. And I remember then snapping back, because I got on the phone to my friend who knew me for years, and she knows me, and she was able to talk me through it, and I was able to see that I had entered the red zone, and it was so easy, it was so easy to go there. And if I hadn't, I'd have figured it out, but my friend really helped me in that instant. My female friend, that the other friend is fictional. But I think that's just the loneliness of parenting. You want someone to talk to. But yeah, no, it was. I wanted to go into the not just the darkness, but the just the intensity. I think because people say afterwards, like, yeah, I remember we went to dinner with a few of the school mother friends, and we went through our various stories. There were only 3 of us, and we were all like, all that crazy stuff going on. We just did. We're just 3 women in a Dublin suburb. You know, it's not like we, the only thing that joins us is that we had kids the same year, and we are from very different backgrounds. We're all Irish. Like, there's 3 Irish women who grew up in Dublin, kind of an age, and we all had crazy stories, like near-death stuff. So, you know, it's and it's meant so sold us so serene and cutesy and mumsy, and it's life and death, and you do turn into an animal, and it's far more ferocious, and great strength is needed to get through this, you know. And we tell each other all these stories about heroic men. It's like, look at these women doing this, you know. They are the soldiers. So yeah.
First chapter is really intense. I mean, I was shaking when I read the first chapter. And then the husband, when he comes from work one day, because he's been talking at work, he mentions postpartum depression. So do you think that in the first chapter, is she experiencing that?
Back to my story, I can only talk about me. And postpartum depression is such a huge thing. It took centuries to be recognized. So I don't want to undermine it in any way, but an awful lot of it can be alleviated by support. So my friend set me up with an appointment with a perinatal psychiatrist, and I went in and told my story. And part of the story, it all happened after I came back from a reading in Paris. I went to Paris, had a ball with my breast pump, you know, and doing all that. And when I came back, I remember the milk I had pumped was still in the fridge. My child had been put on formula because I'd left a man in charge. Do you know what I mean? And it just turned into this huge, and I lost the plot and I spiraled. And perinatal psychiatrist, I explained all the, then I this and then I that. And he said, you're going to be fine. Come back next week. You're going to be fine. I said, how do you know I'm going to be fine? He goes, I know. So I came back next week and I said, how did you know I'd be fine? How did you know I wasn't going to kill myself? He says, you're not depressed. I said, how do you know I'm not depressed? I was suicidal. And he said, when you went to Paris, you had a ball. If you were depressed, you cannot have a ball. Depression is not that, you know, it's just you were in circumstances that with a bit of support, this would not have happened. So if I had maybe gone to a GP and they'd given me antidepressants, it's not going to fix the problem, which is not me having postnatal depression, but like no support. If a woman is not supported and has to do everything, she becomes hypervigilant. And my level of hypervigilance was, I need to kill myself. That's how hypervigilant I became. I'm only seeing this now. I'm talking out loud. I probably should stop. But it's all under examined and ill-defined. And, you know, even that word matrescence is not one we use, even though it's a huge thing that happens to women who give birth. So she says to her, he says, you have postpartum depression. Postnatal is what we say in Ireland. And she said, no, I have life is shit depression. And I didn't have postnatal depression, but I was suicidal. And you can be those 2 things. I had life is shit depression. It wasn't depression at all. It was just circumstantial, but it's not studied. And I can't talk about postnatal depression because I don't want to say support women when maybe they do need medication. But every woman's different. And maybe it's not about medicating, but supporting in some instances, not all. I'm sorry, I'm very cautious about saying anything about postnatal depression. I just know that I thought I had it and I didn't. And any amount of antidepressants would not have fixed the problem. Silent.
Any final questions? Well,
What
thank
a
you
note to
so
end
much.
on.
Thank you so much, Claire. So thank you for a wonderful chat, Claire, and an amazing book. And there are copies for sale, which Claire will probably sign, I'm imagining. Would you sign a book or two?
Got a book or two.
Fantastic. And there are also refreshments in the basement. So we can all adjourn downstairs and refresh ourselves and have more chats and see what happens. Yeah.
Thank you, Connor. Thank you.
So, yeah.